A fat manila envelope sits open on my kitchen table. Tabs say, "Sign here." Inside, a 3-bed on a quiet Ohio street, a mortgage, taxes. And one thing missing, my name. Down the hall, my son laughs on speaker. "Grab bars in the front bedroom before your mom moves in." He means his mother-in-law, not me. 7 months ago, he sat in this chair, asked for $20,000. "Mom, you'll have your own room, always." I wrote that word down like a promise you could live inside. Today, the deed says ours, but ours somehow doesn't include mother. I don't shout. I listen. I make tea and a different list. Security deposit, alternator, braces, daycare. Line by line, the truth stacks up. $49,960 before the down payment. Nearly 70,000 reasons to stop pretending this is timing. Morning comes. The phone rings. "Movers need $3,800 by today. Paint crew needs half." Urgency. Like always, trussed up as love. I put on my navy slacks, close an extra card, move my money, open a P.O. box. At noon, a lawyer slides me a pen and a sentence that feels like a spine. Writing isn't love. It's the path love has to walk. By 4, my son is at my table. I slide one sheet across. 2 options, I say calm as a library whisper. 48 payments or a real room with the real door. Because the Bank of Evelyn closed. And that right there is where this story truly begins. I couldn't sleep that night. Sleep kept skittering away from me like a shy cat. Around 4, I gave up. I made coffee and sat at the table with my notebook and a pile of pens and a stack of envelopes with corners bent from too many moves. The light outside was that pale gray Ohio does so well in late winter, flat as an old sheet. I drew a line down the center of the page. On the left, I wrote, "In the last 5 years, things I gave." On the right, I wrote, "How I explained them to myself." Then I started. $500 for the security deposit when they had to leave their first apartment in a hurry because the landlord wouldn't fix the mold. Explained to myself, they're trying, they're young. $800 for the alternator that died on 270 one Sunday morning while Tiana was driving to a double shift. Explained, it's dangerous to be on the side of the road. People get hit and don't come home. $2,000 for Connor's braces down payment because the orthodontist had a slot and we couldn't waste it. Explained, teeth are forever. $1,200 for daycare so they wouldn't lose their spot. Explained, what's money for if not to keep the baby steady? $3,000 to catch up on the credit card that grew like a vine over a summer of layoffs. Explained, the country doesn't make this easy. We help each other. $45 here and there for school picture day, for soccer cleats, for field trip t-shirts. Anything under $100 I didn't write. I added it all. I wrote the number small, as if shrinking them would change their truth. It came to $49,960, not counting the $20,000 for the down payment last month. $70,000 if I rounded. $70,000 in small files. I stared until the numbers did that thing where they reorganize themselves if you look long enough, like fish in a pond rediscovering the way to swim. Around 7:15, my phone lit up. "Marcus," I answered.
"Morning, Mom," he said, bright, determined. People tell me he inherited my get-it-done voice. "Listen, don't freak. Movers need a deposit this afternoon. The quote's close to $3,800. The paint guys also want half up front if we want them Friday. I can pay back by June, no problem. Can you front it and I'll send you Zelle the minute my bonus hits? You know how it is, timing." I let the words fill the air like steam. For a beat too long, he thought maybe the call had dropped. "Marcus," I said, "when do I get to see the house?" He hesitated. I could hear him trying to decide whether to blurt or craft. He landed in the middle and found himself saying nothing. "It's not really ready," he said. "There's sheetrock dust and a guy patching the garage ceiling. Once it's done, we'll take you. It's just, there's a lot going on. Let's not add to it." He cleared his throat. "You know how you get when plans change." I took a breath. I pictured my rib cage opening like a window. I pictured the space inside me where a guest room could have been. "Let me think about it," I said. "About 3,800? He laughed a soft, nervous laugh, the one he uses at work on conference calls when someone suggests a timeline that only exists in movies. "Mom, it's me." "I'll call you in a few days," I said. "In a few days?" His voice lifted like a question balloon. "Mom, they won't hold the date in a few days. Movers book up, paint guys do other jobs. If I don't lock it today, I'll call you in a few days," I said again. And then I did a thing I have never done to my son in 35 years of being his mother. I said, "I love you. I have to go." And I hung up. My hands trembled a little after, not like before, not from the kind of sadness that hollows you out, from a new thing, a clarity that was almost stern. I got dressed. I put on my navy plaits that never need ironing and my cardigan that doesn't mind dog hair because it has met so much of it in the library over the years. I brushed my hair, put on a little mascara with my elbow propped the way the nurse taught me after my wrist surgery, and I walked the 2 blocks to the credit union where I've been banking since the time they gave you a toaster if you opened a checking account. "Morning, Miss Carter," said the teller, who is my age and wears silver hoops and always remembers that I like the pens with the thicker grip. "How can I help today?" "I'd like to remove an authorized user from my account and cancel an extra debit card and set up a P.O. box for statements." I said it in a voice that surprised me with how competent it sounded, like the voice I used when a patron brought a baby goat into the library during story time and I needed to ask them gently but firmly to take their goat outside. We clicked through menus, we signed, I moved a chunk of my savings to a separate account with no Zelle attached. I set up a small certificate ladder I should have built years ago if anyone had taught me the word ladder in any context other than fire drills and paint stores. The teller slid papers toward me. I signed my name. I went across the street to the post office and stood behind a veteran with a Vietnam cap and a small boy who couldn't decide which stamp art was braver. I rented a box. The key to it was dull brass and heavier than it looked. I dropped it into my purse and it hit the bottom with a sound that made me feel steadier. At noon, I had an appointment with an attorney a woman at the credit union recommended, a woman named Carolyn Pittman, whose office was 3 floors above a hardware store that sells the kind of screws that make old furniture last. Miss Pittman had gray hair like a crown, an easy laugh, and that careful way of listening that makes you think maybe your life has been important after all. "I want to update my will, also my power of attorney, also my beneficiaries, also whatever document there is that says what happens to me if I am breathing, but not here." "We can do all of that," she said, and slid a pen across her desk like a baton. "Tell me what changed."
"I think what changed is that I finally opened my eyes," I said. And then, because she was a stranger and sometimes we tell strangers the truth, I told her about the house, the down payment, the phone call that used the word ours and meant it in a way that was not large enough to include me. I told her about the list I had made, the sum at the bottom, the new request like it was nothing at all. She did not look surprised. She did not look bored. She did not look like she was waiting for me to stop so she could tell me a story about her own son that would end with me saying, "At least I'm not alone." She took notes. She asked a few clear questions. She said, "We will put things in writing. Writing is not love, but it does shape the path love has to walk down." We changed my will. I left money to Marcus, yes, because love is not subtraction, but I also carved out a bequest to the library's adult literacy program and to a local women's shelter that I've donated coffee to for years, but never more than $20 at a time because I told myself I needed to save for later. I named my friend Gloria as my healthcare proxy because she always knows the right questions to ask doctors and because she once made a cardiologist draw me a picture of my own heart. We added language that said any gifts to my son in my will could be conditional, that a trustee could require certain responsibilities while I am alive, a monthly dinner, rides to appointments, the kind of small, respectful acts grown children can forget to offer until a lawyer says, gently and with a smile, "It's in the document." I don't know if we will use that part.
It isn't about holding him hostage. It's about building a structure where care has to have a shape. Do you want me to draft a letter to your son? Miss Pittman asked. Not legal, just clear. Something that says what you are doing and why. I want to do that, I said. I want him to hear my voice. When I left her office, the town looked different, although the same people were walking the same dogs past the same closed-for-lunch barber. The air tasted like the inside of an apple. I walked to a diner and slid into a booth. I ordered a tuna melt with pickles and a slice of lemon pie I did not have to justify to anyone. When the pie came with a curl of whipped cream, I let the spoon sit on my tongue for a second and felt the sweetness loosen something across my shoulders. It cost $14 plus tip. I paid in cash. The bills looked like paper and not like something alive that might run out of my hand if I loosened my grip. By 3:30, my phone had chirped itself hoarse in my purse. 16 missed calls, 10 texts. I turned it on to check for emergencies that did not exist and read each message in the bright light of the screen, as if by reading them I might understand why they thought urgency could substitute for care. Mom, it's me. Call me when you get this. Movers need an answer. That was at 8:10. Miss E, it's Tiana. Are you okay? We're worried. That was at 9:22. This is stupid. I'll just come over. That was from Marcus at 12:05. Then, at 2:47, if this is about the house, we can talk. Maybe we can figure something out so you have your space too. But I need you to help me with the move first. Then we'll fix the other stuff. I stared at the phrase, other stuff, until the words went sideways. I put the phone face down. I said about restoring my apartment to the place I live and not the waiting room for someone else's life. I did small things. Folded kitchen towels, watered the plant on the sill that always looks like it's in a good mood, wiped the stove like I was erasing a math problem I'd written too messy. At 4 o'clock, like he said he would, Marcus knocked on my door. There was a second knock, lighter. They had come together. I did not feel dread. I felt something like that moment in the library when the doors opened at 10 and you knew you'd do the day well. Mom, he said, the second the door swung open, and he reached for me like we were on a porch in a storm and I was the only solid thing. I stepped back, and he let his hands drop. Tiana stood behind him, her face tight with the work of holding two truths at once. She carried a plastic folder, papers pressed like leaves inside it. Come in, I said. Sit. They sat at the table. I stayed standing for a second because I wanted to remember how tall I was. Then I sat too. The envelope from the title company was still there, a polite stack. I slid it to the side like a plate I was done with. Are you okay? Tiana asked. We were scared. You weren't answering. I'm okay, I said. I was busy. Busy with what? Marcus said, and immediately softened the way people do when they hear themselves sounding like their own father than they'd prefer. Sorry, it scared me. You always pick up. I always did. I am trying something different. He looked down, then up. He had fixed things with his look for years. It worked on teachers who thought he was charming, and on girlfriends who decided they loved him again, and on me, who could never resist the person he promised to be. It didn't work now. He put his hand flat on the table, the way he does when he wants to seem steady. Mom, he said, if this is about the house, it is about the house, I said, gently. And about the words you used when you asked for help. And about the words you and your wife used in my hallway when you believed I was a piece of furniture that doesn't have ears. He swallowed. Tiana's eyes filled. She looked down. I didn't let the moment run away. In your excitement, you said your mother would have a room with a view. You said you needed peace. You said the kids shouldn't have to manage me. You said I could come through dinners and we would make space. Tiana lifted her head. Miss E, she said, that was not how we meant it. I am sure you didn't mean to hurt me, I said, but you did. And because I am a grown woman with a mind, I am not going to slot myself into a corner like a folding chair. Marcus began to cry. It wasn't the dramatic kind. It was the kind that happens when a grown man realizes he has been so busy building a life, he forgot to notice the people who laid the foundation. He put his hands over his face. He's been doing that since he was 2. He said, I'm sorry. God, Mom, I am so sorry. We thought we were doing the adult thing, making the calm call. We didn't think. We didn't really think. I know you didn't, I said. Here is what I've done. I closed the extra card on my account. I moved some money where you cannot reach it by accident. I updated my will and my medical documents. I am not a faucet you forget to turn off. The Bank of Evelyn is closed. He laughed through tears, a little helpless, that sound people make when the joke they've been using turns out to be real. He had called me that once, the Bank of Evelyn. He had meant it affectionately, like when you joke about the way somebody always has a mint when you need one. I had laughed with him then. I did not laugh now. Here is what I am willing to do, I said, and I pulled a piece of paper from my notebook and laid it on the table like a placemat. I am willing to consider 2 options. Tiana sat straighter. When someone offers you options, take a breath. That's what I've learned at the library when 2 kids fight over a puppet. 1, I said, you repay the $20,000 over 48 months beginning next month. It is a loan. We will write it down. We will keep it simple. If 1 month you cannot pay, you tell me before the 1st. You do not hide. You do not make me ask. My father and I raised you on less than that. You can do it on more. He nodded quickly, relief leaping into his eyes because math is a way out, and he needed a way out. Yes, we can make that work. We can tighten for a while. We'll cut back. We'll... 2, I said, and he stopped. If you cannot or do not want to repay, then you honor the words you used at my table. You set aside a room for me. I do not mean the couch. I do not mean an air mattress in the unfinished basement. A room with a door that lacks and a closet that shuts. We pick a date 3 months from now. We make a list of what that means. I do not intend to be there every day. I am not looking to move in and rearrange your silverware, but I am not going to ask permission to exist. Tiana started to speak and then stopped because she is smart enough to realize her first impulse would not be her best one. She looked at Marcus. He looked at his hands like maybe they would tell him something he did not know. He finally lifted his eyes to mine. Are you putting us in a corner? I don't mean that rude. Is this a punishment? This is a boundary. Punishment expires. Boundaries hold. I should have set them when you were 10 and thought if you smiled at me while asking for an extra hour on the Nintendo, that meant my job was to say yes. My job is not to say yes. My job is to love you. Love without edges just spills all over and ruins the cabinet. He wiped his face with his sleeve and nodded as if he were in church, and the sermon line finally made a shape around something he had been carrying. And one more thing, I said, no more emergency asks. If you need help, you ask with a plan. You do not put your urgency on my back like a coat you forgot to wear. I am not cold. We sat there. Tiana breathed. The apartment made the small noises houses make when everyone stops talking and starts hearing again. Refrigerator hum, a truck on the street, the sound of a leaf brushing a window. Finally, Tiana said, I was wrong. The plainness of it, the way she did not try to gel it into a speech, undid me a little. I picked up my tea as if it could hide what my mouth might do. She looked at me and nodded as if she could see the place where my resolve was stitched. I grew up watching my mother take in whoever needed a bed, she said. I thought I was protecting her this time. I thought if I made the space for her, I was being a good daughter. I didn't think about what it means to make space by pushing someone else out. Her voice went tight. I'm sorry. That's not who I want to be. Don't be her, I said, and I smiled so she would feel the hand in the words. After they left, I sat in the quiet for a while. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel destroyed. I felt like someone who had been carrying 2 heavy grocery bags a long time and just set them down on a counter that would hold. The next morning, there was no barrage of texts. There was one message at 8:12. We hear you. We will talk and get back to you. Love you. It was signed by both of them, as if their hands were 2 birds landing on the same branch. I did my errands slowly. I bought dish soap and carrots and a new spatula with a handle that won't melt if it touches the pan because the smallest upgrades matter. I went to the library. Not for work, not because anyone needed me to fix the printer or tell them where the biographies live. I went to be in a place where time has the decency to be quiet. I picked out a book of essays by a woman who writes about getting older, like it's a geography everyone should visit before they talk about it. I checked it out to myself. The scanner beeped the same way it had beeped 1,000 times when I held other people's books. It felt like a small homecoming. 3 days later, Marcus texted, "Can we come by at 4? We've talked." They sat at the same table. This time, they brought a printed sheet with lines and dates. Tiana had used the good font. The plan was simple and real. They would start repayment in 30 days, $420 a month. If any month they couldn't, they would say so before the 1st. They would send it the same day each month. No chasing, no waiting for me to ask like a bill collector. There was also a separate paper with the words Mom's Room on it, a list of what it would need if option 2 became the path. A real bed, a reading lamp, a small dresser, a chair by the window. The chair made something inside me soften. They had thought past the token. Marcus said, "We chose this. We're choosing to repay. It feels like the right tone, but we want you to know the room will be there. If you want it, when you want it. Not a favor, a fact. And we'll bring you over next week to show you the house. Dust and all. We should have done that the day we put in the offer. Tiana said we were scared you'd tell us not to. It turns out you just needed us to treat you like you were part of the we." I signed the paper with the repayment plan the way you sign when you're both mother and bank, and that balance doesn't feel like a sin. We hugged. It was a good hug, the kind you feel in your shoulder blades. A week later, I stood in their new front yard while Connor and little Ava ran in circles around my knees. The house was a skinny Cape Cod with shutters that will need repainting and a maple that will drop so many leaves in October it will look like the ground made an amber rug. Inside smelt like new paint and bleach and something else. Hope, maybe, which is a smell you only recognize when you've lived long enough to know it doesn't last by accident. They showed me the kitchen, which is small and bright. They showed me the dent in the refrigerator door the delivery guys promised to fix. They showed me the front bedroom, the one that looks out on the backyard with the maple. Someone had vacuumed slow lines across the carpet like the stripes on a baseball field. The windows were open. A breeze moved the curtains. The wall was newly painted a color called whisper. I sat on the floor and leaned against the wall and felt for a minute like the room could hear me breathe. "Mom," Marcus said, standing in the doorframe like I might run if he didn't take up enough space to catch me. "We put a chair on the list, but I figured you'd choose your own. Maybe something yellow. You've always liked yellow." "I do. It looks like a happy thing that learned manners."
We laughed. The tension that had been sitting like a guest who doesn't know how to leave finally picked up its coat. That night, back in my apartment, I wrote a letter to myself, the way Miss Pittman suggested, but not about legal things. I wrote, "Dear Evelyn, here is what you did well. You asked for clarity. You withheld money you did not have to give. You did not make your son prove his love with a grand performance. You asked for simple human acts. Here is what you learned. You can love someone and say no. Here is what you know. Forgiveness keeps you light. Consequences keep you upright." I tucked the letter behind the magnet on my fridge that looks like a slice of watermelon. It made me smile. Life wasn't a movie after that. Of course it wasn't. There were messy bits, the way humans drag their mess behind them like a sweater that won't come all the way off. One month, the payment came late. When I reached for my old habit to fill the gap for them, to promise something I did not owe, I felt the letter on the fridge pulling me back into the person I had written. I texted Marcus, "You missed the first." He replied, "I am right. I'm fixing it today. I am sorry." It arrived that afternoon with a note, "I appreciate you." I wrote back, "I love you." The distinction mattered. It is possible to offer love without offering yourself for consumption. I put other things in motion that had nothing to do with the house and everything to do with the shape of the rest of my life. I spent a Saturday morning at the women's shelter with Gloria, sorting donations in a back room that smelt like detergent and Grace. A woman my age with a bruise almost healed on her cheek asked if she could take 2 towels instead of 1 because her sister was coming to stay. I said yes before I remembered I was supposed to check a list. Sometimes rules exist to keep people safe. So does the urge to hand someone an extra towel and say, "Take it." I started volunteering at the library again, 2 mornings a week, reading aloud to adults learning English. The first day, a tall man from Eritrea cried when he read his first sentence without prompting, and you could have lit the room with the sound of his laugh. What I mean is, my life tilted toward things that fed my own bones, not just other people's schedules.
In May, I bought a used bicycle from a guy down the block who kept it in his hallway and couldn't stop telling me how stable it was at low speed. It was the color of a robin's egg and had a basket in the front. I rode it to the farmer's market on Saturdays and learned the names of the women who sell the best tomatoes. I told them when I planned to make sauce. They told me when to wait one more day. That's how love keeps showing up if you let it. Someone telling you, gently, to pick a different tomato. In July, on a Tuesday the color of mown grass, Tiana called me to say Vanessa had moved in. Not with them. Not yet. Her move had been more complicated than a room with a view could solve. There were logistics and a cousin who needed a ride to dialysis on the other side of town. There were 1,000 tiny reasons the world gets in the way of our best ideas. I could hear the fatigue in Tiana's voice, and I could hear something else, a softness that didn't need to press anyone aside to exist. "We've been talking," she said. "Your option too. I don't want it to be just words. When you're ready, we want weekends. We want you to come and stay, or we come to you. Not so we can show the neighbors we have all our elders lined up at the table like decorative plates. So the kids know that your laugh sounds like bells. So Sunday sauce belongs to someone. So somebody can teach me how not to overwork biscuit dough." "I'll bring my recipes," I said, "and I'll sit in my yellow chair in the room with the window." "You bought a yellow chair?" she asked, delighted. "On sale," I said, seeking and finding that old silly pleasure in having gotten something good for less. In September, we had dinner at their house on the first cool night that smelled like school supplies and little sweaters. Tiana made baked chicken and broccoli with garlic. Marcus made mashed potatoes with lumps because life has lumps, and sometimes it's not the job of soup or potatoes to smooth them out. The kids took turns telling me about their teachers. Connor's math teacher wears bow ties and says math is a language everyone can learn if they are allowed to make noise while they try. Ava's teacher lets them take off their shoes to read. We sat around the table, we passed bowls, we ate. The window over the sink looked out on the maple that would soon turn a color that makes you believe the world can change without becoming a stranger. When it was time to go home, Marcus walked me to my car. He did not say anything for a long moment. People imagine apologies are speeches. They forget how many of them happen in silence, standing beside someone, breathing the same air. He did not say anything for a long moment. People imagine apologies are speeches. They forget how many of them happen in silence, standing beside someone, breathing the same air. He did not know, he said finally. He did not know how much I leaned on you. He did not know how much of that leaning felt like love and how much of it felt like you were a wall I didn't have to build. Then you know now, and you are building. He nodded, the motion of a man who has learned that progress looks like setting his alarm and making a payment and showing up to fix a light bulb without anyone asking you to. He hugged me. It was a good hug, familiar and new at once. In November, I went with Gloria to a wreath-making class, even though I kill most plants by looking at them too hard. I hung the wreath on my door crooked and liked how it made the hallway smell like pine. Every time I came home, I felt that little rush, the welcome you get to give yourself. Sometimes I think about the beginning, about sitting at my kitchen table with that manila envelope and the sentence hours that did not have space for me. I think about how easy it would have been to hand over $3,800 because urgency is contagious and I catch it easily. I think about how that would have changed me, how resentment grows like mold in a damp house when you keep feeding it air and don't open all the windows you can. I'm not proud it took me this long. I am proud it didn't take me longer. The last Saturday before Christmas, we all went to the tree lighting downtown because the children wanted hot chocolate and to yell when the switch flipped. We stood with everyone else and counted backward from 10. The tree's lights blinked on. People cheered for the idea that 1 second can change a tired street into a bright one. Marcus slipped his arm through mine. He did not lean on me. He stood beside me. Tiana tucked her hand through my other arm and lifted it like we were winning a race for a second.
"Mom," he said, "so you know this is better. Not just good because it makes you happy. Better like I am learning things I should have learned before. About money, about help, about not putting that word other in front of the word stuff when the stuff is a person." "Good," I said. "Keep learning. We all do." Back at my apartment, I made tea and leaned against the counter while the kettle shook itself toward boiling. I looked at the letter under the watermelon magnet. I read it again. Dear Evelyn. I folded it in half, then in half again, and slid it into the drawer with the title company envelope, with the electric bill, with the small map of this life I've started bothering to draw. I stood by the window and looked out at the street light that makes the snow look like it's falling up. If this were a story I was giving someone at the library, I'd tell them the ending is not grand. No one gets thrown out of anything. No one tempts anyone to enormous gestures. What we get, if we're lucky, are small, decisive acts repeated. A payment made on time. A chair chosen for comfort, not show. A call made before the first of the month. A room that doesn't have to be used every day to be real. I still keep a list out of habit, not because I'm tallying, because I like to see the shape of things. On the left, I write things I gave this month: 2 bags of clementines to the shelter, a ride to the clinic for my neighbor, a casserole for a young couple in our building who couldn't get the oven to light. On the right, I write things given to me. A letter from Ava written in pencil that says I am the best cookie baker she knows. The way the librarian smiled when I returned my own book on time. The morning I looked at my face in the bathroom mirror and saw a woman I respected looking back. Love is not a ledger, but it helps sometimes to see that the columns are not always a cliff. Spring came back around, like it always does in Ohio, first with wet gray and then with a sudden green that looks like the world forgot to hold back. I stood in the front bedroom at their house again one afternoon and put my hands on the windowsill. A yellow chair sat in the corner, taller and brighter than what I would have chosen and exactly right for the room. I sat and listened to the kids playing in the yard and to the low hum of the dishwasher and to the quiet inside myself. I thought about the word ours and how it doesn't have to be the same shape for everyone to stand in it. My hands don't shake now when I pick up papers with tabs in them and the kind of signatures that make your wrists tired. I can hold them, I can put them down, I can tell the difference between something that belongs to me and something that doesn't. I can want a room and decide not to take it. I can be offered help and say yes without fear I'm making a debt I will owe forever. I can say no to the emergency that isn't mine. I can recognize the emergencies that are. Here's the part that feels like a moral, though I don't say it out loud when I'm in the checkout line or sitting across from my son at his kitchen table while he frets about insurance. Boundaries are not a wall you build to keep out love. They are the door frame love passes through so it knows it's in the right house. Forgiveness does not erase consequences, it makes room for them to matter less. The other night, walking back from the grocery store with a small bag and my Robin's egg bike pushing quietly beside me, I stopped at the corner to watch a string of lights someone had wrapped around their porch rail. A woman about my age stood on the step adjusting one bulb that never sits quite right. She looked over and smiled. "Finally got it to behave," she said. "Good for you. Sometimes it just takes a firm hand."
We laughed. The light flickered once and then settled, like even it was relieved to be in the shape it needed to be. When I got home, I put the kettle on and grabbed the mug with the tiny chip on the rim that I use more than the nice one. I sat at my small table and turned on the lamp whose light lives somewhere between gold and memory. I opened my notebook. I wrote, "Today I kept my promise to myself." Then, because the habit of the ledger can be useful, I made 2 new columns I had never made before. On the left, I wrote ways I respected myself. On the right, I wrote ways others did. Under the first, I wrote said no, said yes, went to bed on time. Under the second, I wrote he paid on the first. I closed the book and set it beside the plate where I'd put 2 cookies I had been saving for no reason at all. Saving for a reason that used to be someone else's urgency. Saving because I thought I had to. I ate 1 cookie and saved the second for tomorrow. Because that is who I am now. A woman who trusts there will be a tomorrow. Who knows she gets to decide what goes in it. If you asked me, looking straight into my face, what changed, I would say this. I remembered that the key is mine. The key to the P.O. box the clerk handed me across the counter with a smile. The key to the front door of the little place I pay for each month with my own deposits. The key to the quiet of my morning. The key to saying, you can have a room without having my life. I kept it in my purse, and when it was too heavy, I put it in my pocket where my hand could feel it. I stopped handing it to anyone who sounded like an emergency I didn't cause. I love you, I told my son the next time he came by, and I meant it. You have the rest. What's the rest? He asked, smiling. The rest is everything you have to build with your own 2 hands, I said, and the room you make for other people without making them small. He nodded, and we sat at my table, eating stew I'd made earlier in the afternoon, the kind that tastes better on the second day. We talked about his work, and about the neighbor's dog that believes it is a person, and about the way the maple and their backyard gave up all its leaves one wild hour in a storm and then stood there like a naked truth. When he left, the door clicked softly. I rinsed the bowls. I set them to dry. I turned off the lamp. I stood for a minute in the doorway to the hall, listening to the apartment hum, not begging it to be something else, not wishing it were a bigger room in someone else's house, not bargaining, just hearing its small sounds, the ones that say, "You did right by me. You did right by yourself. You did the kind of right that doesn't make a great story for strangers, but makes a good life for the person who has to live it." I went to bed. I slept. I dreamed a quiet dream. In it, I sat in a sunny chair by a window. There was a geranium on the sill. The petals were the shade of a cherry lollipop. Outside, a bird hopped on a fence post and looked around at a world that had not changed except in the ways that mattered. And inside, I took a breath that went all the way to the bottom of my lungs. I let it out. I did it again.